In this video, I'll show you how to make your own free lo-fi beat using free samples and free software. First, we'll head over to smoothsamples.com where we can get some free samples here. Click on the free sample button, and let's start with the lo-fi drums. You'll be able to preview each sample, and you can start the sample from any section of the waveform. Let's go ahead and click download. You'll be prompted to sign up. Go ahead and do that real quick, and it'll take you back into your samples. Now we're able to download, and notice in yellow it shows the beats per minute. This will be important later. Next up, let's grab some lo-fi piano runs. You'll notice that it also includes the key as well as the beats per minute in yellow here. This is all good for matching up our samples and making sure everything is in the right key at the right beat per minute. Let's grab some bass real quick, and that should be everything we need to make a beat. Here we are in Reaper, which you can download for free online. I've loaded up one of the lo-fi piano samples, and we'll notice down below at beats per minute, it's set to 62. We're gonna change this to 80 because our drum beats are at 100 beats per minute, and we're gonna basically split the difference between the BPMs of the two different samples. We also want to right-click on the rate next to the beats per minute down on the bottom of the screen and ensure that we preserve the pitch in the audio when we're changing the play rate. This is how we change the beats per minute while preserving the original pitch of the sample. Here we're rendering this file out, changing it from its original BPM up to 80. Go ahead and type in a file name, find your preferred folder. We're going to leave it in a wave format. I'm going to bump it up to floating point, 32-bit, just in case there's a peak that I want to tame. And now we're ready to render. Now that all of our samples have the correct BPM, we can go ahead and start arranging. There's really no wrong answer here. You can go ahead and take a full sample and stick it next to another full sample and throw the drums underneath it. Or if you want to get a little more creative with it, you can start arranging and editing little pieces of the samples together to make wholly new pieces of music. I'm not being too precise in my cuts just yet, that'll come later. But for now, I'm rearranging things until I'm happy with an intro, a verse, and a chorus that I can work with. Now we can drill down on the drum tracks and make sure they're lining up nicely with the samples above. With lo-fi, there's a nice amount of swing to it. It's not necessarily metronomic, right on the beat all the time. So what I'll do first is take the kick and snare that I like from each of these two drum tracks and combine them together to make a new track featuring the elements that I enjoy the most. And once this is finished, the next step will be to make sure that the beginning of each kick is lining up nicely or more closely to the notes. Just a little nudge. It doesn't have to be 100%. Once again, this is more of a live feel with the lo-fi world and the instrumentation. And now that my beat is nice and lined up with the track above, I'm going to go ahead and add in a little bit of flair. I'm going to take a snare sample, I'm going to reverse it, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to put the reverse right before the forward playing snare to give a little extra pop. Next up, I'm going to repeat the drum process with the rest of the sections. And this will be a combination of lining up the beats right to the samples, as well as copying and pasting once I have good measures already laid out and properly working. This will provide a nice backbone where you can start copying and pasting all sorts of sections and creating a full intro, verse, chorus, and outro. Moving next to the bass, we're going to use our first free plugin that Reaper already offers, called the Samplomatic 5000. And by holding Control, clicking the mouse and dragging across the track, you will create a brand new MIDI track, which we can write into. We don't need a MIDI controller. We can actually click and drag notes and make them ourselves with a mouse. And here I'm just going section by section, drawing in the notes, doing a bit of copying and pasting when necessary. And once the bass is finished, we'll have a much more fleshed out, full feeling song. Next comes some house cleaning. I'm going to go ahead and merge multiple tracks onto the same track, as well as delete any unused tracks, just to have a bit of a better visual feel. Now that the track is all cleaned up and looking real pretty, we're going to start our mixing process. First up, I'm combining all of the piano tracks, and I'm going to merge them into a bus. This bus basically controls all three tracks at once, like a macro editor. On this bus, I'm using reverb and EQ. Both of these are free. Every plugin I'm using, once again, is free, and you can use these yourself. For this intro, I'm shaping the EQ to give that kind of vintage lo-fi feel, real narrow band within about 500 to 5000K. Now that that's done, we're going to move on to the drum bus. Same idea, taking all the drums, put them into one bus. We're going to throw some compression onto it. I like the ratio at about 4. And here's just a fun little effect I want to end the song with, using a bit of stereo width to give it a bit more dynamics. Notice here in the piano EQ, I've carved out the low end. That's to let the kick drum really ring through on the track. Lots of reverb on everything. I like that to be cohesive. Finally, here on the master track, we have the last batch of plugins we'll use to finish mixing and mastering. I'm using very gentle EQ here. You don't want to overdo it at this point because it'll affect the entire track. Same for the compression. The ratio is a little bit lower and the threshold is not as severe. I've also added some saturation, which really helps just glue all the disparate pieces of a track together and make it sound like one nice glued track. And finally, I'll use a limiter and clipper, and this will help ensure that we're getting as loud as possible without clipping. Finally, the last step to this process is to render out. Make sure that it's the master mix. You have your file name, destination folder it's going into, and we're going to go ahead and click render. You can see here this is right in the range we want. The LUFS are at 15 and the peak is at -1, which is industry standards at the moment. And that's it. We've made our own lo-fi track for free. We can use these in any kind of medium we want. It was super easy, super fun. Thanks for watching.